let's move forward and let's talk about the concept of openness. So let's do that with Paolo Zaccardi, who is the CEO of Fabrick, who's going to give us an example, a concrete example of open banking. So how do you create this ecosystem? How do you put together the banks with the challengers, so the traditional operators with the innovative ones, and they sort of serve as a link between these two worlds. Zaccardi? Welcome. A dopo.
So, good afternoon. It's a real privilege to stay here at this first session of the Fintech Goes to Italy. So, at Fabrick, we strongly believe that collaboration between fintechs and the banks is the only way for banks to compete in the future. We have heard a lot from the other speakers about open banking, about collaboration, about big tech. We think that the only way to compete with these new entrants in the banking industry is really collaborate each other. And to explain that and to give you our point of view, I'd like to get started with the very precise announce that appeared about 10 years ago. Who knows who made this announce? If you remember a couple of guys, Brian Cesca and Joe Gebbia, made this announce, appeared this announce at a newsletter for an upcoming convention for designers in San Francisco. They were designers, they couldn't afford the cost of their loft, and they decided to share the space. So after that, they launched a company that you know very well, that is Air, Bed and Breakfast, that is Airbnb, that revolutionized absolutely an industry that were absolutely well regulated with big incumbents like Marriott and Hilton. So they did a revolution, launching a different way, a different business models, and leveraging on technologies of others and services enhanced from others. The tipping point of this kind of change, irreversible transformation that's already happened in the market and also in our industry, we think, has been around 10 years ago. So we had different triggers. The first one, of course, is about the smartphone that you know. We all have all the world in our hands. And thinking about the banking industry, of course, we have the Lehman Brothers and the financial crisis. So something related to the change of the perception about trust in the financial services industry. And then, of course, sharing economy, platform economy, how to use resources from others, how to create new business models. And Airbnb and Uber and others are absolutely very, very good example. Again, more than the technology for us, it's important the business model that you can really use to create new services. And if you think at Uber, for example, at the end, the most important things, it's the API economy that they use. We all use Uber or this kind of services that is completely seamless to us, and we don't know, it's completely transparent for us that to provide this kind of services, they combine many other services from Google Maps, for example, from Evox Images, from Braintree for payments. And this kind of combination is something that happens without we really recognize this kind of value. And the real value is that they could enhance the services, combining also services from other industries. Think about what could happen combining self-driving cars, Uber, and good services delivering, and these kind of things. probably entire industry will be absolutely disrupted. And I think the reality is that we have heard a lot about exponential change, but exponential change is accelerating a lot, and comes from the combination of different factors. Do you know probably the so-called double time? That is the time that we spend to accumulate the data generated so far. So I had to double this kind of data. So now in 2018, we need 1 year to generate all the data generated so far from the beginning of our history. In 2 or 3 years, with the Internet of Things, this time will become 12 hours. So the convergence between technologies, between different business models is bringing a new change also in the fintech space. And that's interesting. Think about the increase of the startup and fintechs that is becoming unicorns. In 5 years, we have the number of fintechs 5x the traditional number that we had in 2011, in 2015. And in 2018, again, this pace is accelerating. We have now 34 fintech unicorns valued more than 1 billion in the fintech space. Of course, the most come from the US. Asia is growing, and Europe is following. We expect that will grow a lot based on the upcoming new PSD2 regulation that will open up data and application, but also will foster the collaboration between banks and fintechs, and will accelerate the pace of this increase. We have some example about digital banking that we call challenger banks. Alessandro before previously mentioned a couple of that, but it's interesting because also a bank that is created from scratch apply from the beginning a platform model. So they don't create all the services alone, they rely on services that comes from others. These are very good examples from Revolut, Starling Bank, and N26. They provide services combining other offerings through, again, like Uber, API model. It's interesting again because they are gaining tractions, acquiring a lot of customers, more than 50 million we have now in terms of banks accounts. It's interesting because it's not a big number if we compare with the traditional digital customers of our banks. We have a good example also in Italy. We are proud to have Hype that acquired the last 12 months 400,000 customers and is targeting 600 new customers by the end of the year. But again, if we compare with our numbers as banks, it's not a big numbers. But beyond, there is the exponential factor. And a very good case of exponential factor is this company that Alessandro mentioned before. You probably know that Amazon needed about 9 years to become profitable. But more interesting for me is that in the middle of history, they spent 14 years to have the same profit of the last quarter of 2017, 1.9 billion. That's an exponential growth. So if you ask, is Amazon a bank? Probably we say not. But they are entering in banking? I would say yes. So think about how many services they could provide that are absolutely can disrupt banking services. It's not strange that in any kind of ranking, the most innovative companies today are not banks. And what is the difference and why? Because they are so good in focusing just one aspect and innovate this aspect. So payment for Square, Stripe, and TransferWise, or investment for Wealthfront, or lending and so on. They just focus on one aspect and use all the technologies, a business model approach based on platform, and then innovate, providing an outstanding customer experience. It's not exactly the banks provide today, isn't it? Interesting again, how we could react as a bank or as a big player or as large corporates. Again, we should understand that the lifespan, everything, the life cycle of everything is accelerating. This is important. Now the lifespan in the ranking of the first 500 companies is less than 15 years. And if you see in 15 years, they changed almost completely, and now all the first 5, 6 companies are digital companies. But how did this company do that? Essentially, they create ecosystem around that. They create ecosystem that could leverage a lot services from others, again and again. It's interesting, again, Amazon. The profit of Amazon comes from Amazon Web Services. And the fortune of Amazon comes from 3 small companies 10 years ago, 3 startups that were Netflix, Airbnb, and Uber, that are customers of Amazon Web Services. Alessandro explained very well why it's so important to collaborate and what is the value on both sides. So I think we should combine different things, resources, assets, customer base from large corporates and incumbents, new talents, focus on customer experience and agility from startups. It's not easy, absolutely not easy. That's the reason because we need innovation hub. We need environment within these kind of things to create a safe environment to experiment, to fail, and to learn. It's not the environment that typically the bank has. Just some surveys, but we had some before, all are on the same aspect at the end, how banks could get from fintechs. For sure, they could get information about value about improving customer experience, how to innovate in some specific areas, and in particular, to me, how to align IT and business strategy. Usually in the big incumbent, these 2 things are completely separate. In the fintech that use, in the startup that use a very agile approach, they are completely combined. And again, another very important aspect is the time to market, how to accelerate the time to market, how to acquire new digital capabilities. So innovation hubs are very important. Alessandro Longoni explained very well what at Fintech District we are doing. And an important thing is the connection between spots. So how to really become a gateway for Italian fintechs. So creating connection with other innovation hubs in Europe. And this is the list of the innovation hubs that are connecting at the moment. How we could really create a safe environment to networking and again to experiment and to learn. How we can put together different kind of stakeholders. It's very important. It's not just about fintechs, not just about banks. We need capital that comes from investor. we need academia, we need universities from talents for this kind of things. And we need, of course, a good relation with the institutions if we want to create a new ecosystem in Italy, like UK. Think about what FCA is doing in reality in UK or in US, other situation. This is the companies that we have. These are the companies that we have in our networks, and are 50% international and the rest Italian, and are all potentially connected, and they could create a business together. In reality, they are already developing new services together. We are developing a new service, a new company with some of these fintechs and startups. Again, already we have some example about that. For me, the important thing is that you could use this kind of collaboration either for enlarging your digital banking capabilities for your customers, your traditional customers, but also to acquire new customers. It is very interesting the case of Royal Bank of Scotland with Starling Bank, that is potentially a competitor, is a challenger bank. But together they are creating something new in order to accelerate the capability to acquire new customers in the digital banking space. Not common in the banking industry, not common if you think at our banks. Again, we have seen some metrics. For me, this is very important from InnoPay. As you can see, there are several approaches. So one is about how to open up your data, probably more related to compliance than not to create new opportunities, and the most are in that space, the first quadrant. Very important is the few that are innovating, enlarging the number of APIs that they can provide. So try to get the opportunities beyond the compliance. Others are, of course, offering a more comprehensive experience, integrating this API with other services. And some are mastering the openness, really putting all together. Unfortunately, we have very few Italian banks in this chart. We are in this chart as a Sella Group, but Fabrick, as part of Sella Group, is moving in the mastering in openness. That is our goal. How to really help not only Sella Group, but other banks in order to offer APIs integrated with services, integrated with other fintechs. That's exactly our vision at Fabrick. Work at different level. The ecosystem level is how can leverage on the ecosystem of fintechs that we are connecting with in different areas. How to provide a platform of services that are already able to create use cases in account aggregation, in active PSD2, payment services, digital lending, collaborating with companies that provide peer-to-peer or SME lending and other vertical services. And creating the API engine to connect banks, insurances, and corporations. At the end, all together are a real open banking ecosystem, not just PSD2 compliance. So that's our goal, that's what we are working on. And at the end, we really think that connecting these kind of dots is the only way to provide the service in the future for banking. It's the only way to compete with big tech, with fintech. It's the only way to shape the future of finance together. Thank you.
Zaccardi, thank you very much for this. So we were seeing not very many Italian banks
Yeah, no.
on the graph. What can they do to be there?
Yeah, I think something is happening. So it's very interesting because so far we have very few banks. One international, that is UniCredit, one is Sella. But something is happening because we are having several platforms in Italy, from CBI, of course, Fabrick, other from big banks. So we think that at the end, the future will be the connection between these platforms. and that will help other banks to open up and to be part of this.
So it's fintech that will help the banks
Absolutely,
be in the
absolutely,
graph.
absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Paolo Zaccardi di Fabrick.